Ever started speaking with a Chinese person for the first time and had absolutely no idea what to say except for ni hao? Ever worried about starting a conversation in the wrong way when talking to someone much older or much younger than you? Or when you're in a formal or casual social situation? Well, I felt all of these too at one point or another until I mastered this set of awesome phrases I'm going to share with you in today's video. So first off, in China, a lot of the body language we use here in the West is also super common. It's common to nod your head when you greet someone for the first time, and a big smile always goes a long way. Shaking hands is also totally normal as well, but remember that Chinese people are far more conservative than us, so physical touch is limited, even among good friends and even family, and especially with people older than you. Hugs, for example, are very rare when sober. And I only hugged my mother-in-law once when I was very drunk, and it was the talk of the town for a while. In fact, I think it still is. So be really careful with hugging. There are also more strict cultural rules in China than we have in the West regarding how to talk to people of different ages or relationships. And I'm going to share some major ones with you today. But just remember, do not worry too much. As a foreigner, especially one speaking great Chinese, which you will if you follow our videos, you'll always get away with mistakes that a native speaker perhaps might not. So let's start off by just general greetings we can use when we're just passing by, when we're not intending to stop and talk to someone, and we just want to be polite and engage with someone, either a stranger or someone that we already know. So when greeting a stranger or passing an acquaintance whose name you don't know in the street, it's common just to say ni hao with a smile and a nod. Ni hao.
你好，
嗨，你好，你叫什么名字？
It's also completely fine to do the standard raising of the head and eyebrows when seeing someone that you recognize. Now, if you know their name, great. You can just say their name first and then 你好.
徐生你好，我是陈可。
你好。
Or if you don't know their name, you can just say their title, whatever is the most appropriate for that situation.
海潮哥，
张老师，
So for example, if you want to get the attention of a shop owner, you might say 老板, which means boss.
老板你好，
哦，
就这两件。
Or if you see a man that roughly resembles your father's age, then you can say 叔叔.
哦，叔叔你好。
Now, if it's a woman that could be roughly your mother's age, then go ahead and use auntie, 阿姨.
阿姨你好，我们又见面了。
例行，我儿子。
阿姨你好，欢迎回来。
Oh, by the way, if you see a lady who is sort of on the border, could be your mother or maybe a bit younger, always go a bit younger and use older sister, 姐姐. Even if she is an 阿姨, she'll feel good when you say 姐姐. Now, if it's the morning, it's common to say 早上好, 早上好, good morning.
嗨，早上好。
Or you can shorten it and make it a bit more casual and just say 早 or 早啊.
早啊，早。
早。
Oh, while we're here talking about 早上好, you've probably learnt 下午好 and 晚上好, right? Good afternoon and good evening. Now, these two you would not say in any casual situation, really. The only sort of situation you would say in is something like this.
欢迎光临，下午好。这是你们今天的菜单。
啊，谢谢。
So yeah, a waiter in a really nice restaurant, for example, or you might see it in this situation.
大家晚上好。
So those are the real basics on how to start any interaction pretty much. Just say 你好 with their title and maybe 早上好, 早啊, and with a nice nod and a smile, maybe even a handshake if you're stopping to talk, right? So after the initial 早上好 or 你好, it's very common when you've come across somebody you're at least acquainted with, whether you're just passing or you're intending on stopping and chatting for a while. It's super common to make a really obvious comment about what they're doing in that moment. So for example, let's continue the clip from a moment ago and see what she says next.
海潮哥，
张老师，
忙完啦。
You see, so this guy owns the restaurant and is clearly resting. So she says, 忙完啦. So you're done working? Try this out next time you greet a Chinese person. Just literally narrate what you see them doing. So if you see them just leaving a place as you're coming in, you might say, 你走啦, you're leaving.
拜拜。我走了。
Or if you see them coming home, you might say, 你回来啦, which means you're back or you're home.
陆姐，
金洛，你回来了。
And I'll be honest, it can feel a bit weird at first when you are the receiver of these kinds of comments. People are like, 你买东西啦, you just bought some stuff and you're carrying a shopping bag and you're like, yes. It could be hard to figure out what to say next, but it's really simple. Just say, or as well as saying, you can actually parrot what they say back to them.
回来了。
回来了吧？
Another phrase commonly used in passing with a Chinese person, someone that you know, or just at the beginning of a full conversation, I always hear my mother-in-law and my wife saying this, is 吃饭了吗? Have you eaten?
你吃饭了吗？
吃饭了吗？回来了，吃饭了吗？
吃过啦。
So if you ever meet someone you know and it's around mealtime, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you will get asked this most likely. It's a way, again, of showing care. And just as she did in that clip, you can simply respond honestly. Oh, 吃了. Yes, I have eaten. Or 吃过了. Both are fine. And if you haven't eaten, and you just say 还没有 or 还没呢, not yet. So I love this phrase, and there's a bunch of little variations you can use to make yourself sound a bit more native and just spice things up. So instead of saying 吃饭了吗, you can say 吃了吗?
海潮哥，
张老师
忙完啦？
啊，吃了吗？
哦，吃过了。
坐，喝点茶。
Or you can ask 吃过早饭了吗? Have you had breakfast specifically? Or 午饭 or 晚饭, like lunch, dinner, it's all fine.
阿福，吃早餐了吗？
哦，吃过了，谢谢。
Or if you want to go a little bit more casual, you could say 吃饭了没有?吃饭了没有?
可亲，吃饭了没有？
Or the even more casual 吃了没?
今天天气挺好的哈。
哦，
吃了没？
So the phrases we just went through are great for pretty much any situation, whether you're stopping to talk or whether you're just passing. But let's get into some really cool phrases you can use when you're actually intending to stop and have a conversation. So let's start off with a situation where you've just been introduced to a new person and you're there about to have a conversation. The standard phrase to use, either straight away just after you've exchanged names or at the very end of the conversation you're about to leave, is 很高兴认识你 or 认识你很高兴.
四公子，我是大哥哥同学，
啊，
很高兴认识你。
我也很高兴认识你。
你好，我是熊茂林，很高兴认识你。
那个，我叫顾佳，很高兴认识你。
我也很高兴认识你。那我先走了。
This literally just means I'm happy to meet you. Now, you wouldn't necessarily say this in every situation. It's relatively formal, and often you'll just say 你好 and 再见, goodbye, when you start and end the conversation. So don't feel like you have to say 很高兴认识你 every single time you meet someone. You can just have a chilled conversation with someone the same age as you, and then just say bye at the end. It's fine. Now, if you're meeting someone that you've heard about before, or at least you want to make them feel like you've heard a lot about them, then you can slightly tweak this phrase. And instead of saying 很高兴认识你, I'm happy to meet you, you can say 很高兴见到你, I'm happy to see you. It's a subtle but very nice difference that native speakers will notice. Now, this next one is relatively rare, but if you use it in the right situation, you'll really impress people. It is 幸会. Now, this phrase is inherently quite formal, but actually you can use it in not necessarily super formal situations. So you use it when you're meeting someone that is clearly of a relatively high status and you want to acknowledge that, right? So check out this clip and you'll see what I mean.
这不高律师吗？幸会啊。
You see, it's a situation where they're not in a networking event or anything, but that gentleman was meeting someone who is a lawyer, and clearly quite a high-level lawyer, and he just wants to express respect in that situation. But yeah, overall, 幸会 is a very formal phrase. So if you're ever in a formal situation where you're meeting someone of high status, you can whip this one out, and you can even double it up. 幸会,幸会.
这是政务司司长张司长，张司长。
幸会，幸会，
幸会，幸会。
But what about if you're in the line at Starbucks or in a waiting room, in a restaurant, a bar, your house, etc., and you end up starting a conversation with someone you know or someone you've been introduced to recently, then you're going to need to say a bit more than 你好, 早上好, or 吃了吗? This is where us foreigners can easily say something awkward or dumb sounding, or worse, just sort of smile stupidly in silence, waiting for a cue for what to say next. So here's how not to get into that situation. Here are the most common phrases Chinese people use when starting a real conversation with someone they are acquainted with. So if you haven't had contact with them in a relatively long time, you can start off by just saying 好久不见, long time no see.
李珠啊，你好，好久不见了。
陈鑫，好久不见。
So I use this phrase regularly with a family friend who goes away on business trips all the time. So he'll be away for 2 or 4 weeks at a time. And when he comes back, I'll say, 培元,好久不见. Now, if it hasn't been that long and you're just catching up, you can say what is probably the most commonly used greeting in all of China, which is 最近怎么样? It's probably the most common and literally means recently, how about? And it's just like saying, how have you been recently?
老吴啊，最近怎么样？
好久不见，你最近怎么样啊？
很好啊，终于考完试了。
And if you wanted to sound more casual, you could drop the m and just say 最近怎样? You could also spice it up a little bit by saying 最近在忙什么? What have you been up to? Or literally, what have you been busy doing?
阿唐，你最近在忙什么呢？
Or you could even try 最近过得怎么样? When you add that 过得怎么样, 过 means time passing, so it's like 过日子, like living. So it means more like how's life been treating you? And so it's expressing a little bit more care.
最近过得怎么样？累不累？
And of course, you can also try the phrase 最近还好吗? You all good recently? And probably expresses the most sincere care of these 4 phrases.
最近还好吗？
So I can pretty much assure you that while there are a ton more phrases you could learn to start conversations in Mandarin Chinese, the ones I've covered here so far will be all you'll need to astound native speakers and maybe even make them forget they're talking to a Chinese learner and just have a meaningful conversation with you. Now, before I get into how to respond when someone asks you how you've been, I need to point out something very, very important. Learning fixed phrases like what we've been doing today is a super effective way of jump-starting your skills and making you more confident in handling certain situations. But if you just memorize fixed phrases, you'd never be able to have a smooth, effortless conversation like native speakers do, like I do every day. To do that, you need to acquire the language naturally through listening, reading, and watching Chinese content, just like you did with your native language. Now, we've spent years perfecting a series of courses we call the Blueprint that can get you to a high level of Chinese 3 to 5 times faster than conventional methods. Think of it as a Chinese degree on steroids. You'll find a link in the description below to learn more about it, and we also have a free webinar that teaches you our entire process of learning Chinese from scratch. So go please check those out now if you're interested in taking your Chinese to a high level. So by now you know what to say to start any conversation in all kinds of situations in Chinese. But what if somebody asks you how you're doing using one of the phrases we just covered? Well, here are my top 3 responses you can start using right now. First is a super common 挺好的呀, which translates nicely as pretty good.
师兄，你最近怎么样？挺好的呀。
Another great one that I really like is 还行. So it's just kind of chilled, like, yeah, I'm all right, not great, not amazing, not terrible, just 还行.
还行。
Or you could try out my personal favorite, 老样子, or 老样子嘛, which to me translates to the very British, same old, same old.
哎呀，森哥，你好久不见，最近还好吗？还行，老样子。
So now you know exactly how to start a conversation in Mandarin, but what about how to end one? Well, you can check out this video for my guide on how to say goodbye like a native speaker and go master that right now.